Hello everybody, it's Albert. In my last video announcing my return, I mentioned that I would be doing some videos on the book series I've been doing, which is Is Jesus a Pagan God? And I did mention that I would do videos for chapters of the book, outlining the chapters of the book, each chapter of the books as they're completed, and I would also be doing what I called extras, which would be the appendices, which may appear in more than one book. And this is going to be one of them. And the reason I decided to start with one of these, and in this particular one, is that I've also recently done a blog post on the same topic. So I think this is an opportune moment to bring this one up. And as you might tell by the title, Acharya S, Attis, and William Butler Yeats, this is going to be a rather strange one. Now, anyone familiar with my videos knows that in the past I've mentioned that she's made some rather odd claims, and that most of her claims, once you apply any level of scrutiny, tend to crumble rather quickly. And this is no exception. But every once in a while, she makes blunders that are not just mild, but off the wall sorts of things that, they just leave you shaking your head in disbelief, and this falls into that category. And this has to do with her defense of one of the claims in Zeitgeist of Attis being crucified. And if you're familiar with the video, you'll recall that when they go through the lists of comparisons between different gods, etc. Now, there is certainly no, I don't even think there is a myth of Attis being crucified, and I certainly don't recall any pre-Christian myth of Attis being crucified, but I'm not sure I recall any myth of Attis being crucified, so it would be really odd for her to come up with something scholarly rather than from some crackpot source or something. So I was interested in seeing what she might have to say. Now, what's fascinating about this is that she's made this graphic, and on the blog post, which I will put a link to in the description, there's a graphic which is taken from her website. It's sort of a three-part. On the far left, it says Zeitgeist claims. In the middle, it's the criticisms of Zeitgeist, and she labels them pseudo-scholarship, which is highly ironic. And she puts the word fail over each one. And then in the final column, she puts the facts. And none of her facts are actual real facts. And we'll get to those in the future at some point. But the one I want to focus on today is of Attis being crucified. And she uses a source for this, and a scholarly one at that. At least that's what it certainly appears. And it's by someone I had never heard of, but that doesn't mean anything. I may be mispronouncing the name. I apologize if I am. It's a Dr. Jose V. Harari, and he apparently referenced a castrated and crucified Attis. Okay, that's interesting. Now, I had no idea who he was, so I checked into it. And it turns out he is a professor, definitely. He's a scholar in French and Italian. Now, I imagine he deals a lot with French and Italian literature, but neither one of those languages even existed when the Cult of Attis did, so you could not exactly call him an authority. But then again, he may have cited someone. So at some point, I did manage to get a look at the book in a university library, and amazingly, things weren't quite as she stated. Now, what I want to point out is that as I pointed out in the blog, in numerous places she quotes him, Jose V. Harari. She quotes him as calling Attis castrated and crucified, and including in this graphic. So she's announcing he's the one who said this. Well, first of all, apparently besides being professor of French and Italian literature, and he also is an expert on literary criticism, which certainly fits into his area of study. So much so that apparently he was asked by an academic publisher to edit, not write, but edit a book, which is the one that she's quoting from, of scholarly papers from a number of scholars in the field of literary criticism. And I think it's the title has something to do with post-structural criticism. I have it in the blog post. I'm doing this all from memory at the moment. But it has something to do with textual strategies in post-structural criticism or something like that. So, in reality, first of all, although the phrase does appear there, it's not by Harari. He's not the one who actually wrote that. So right away, that's wrong. It's by Paul de Man. He's another literary scholar. He's a deconstructionist literary theorist, which again really has nothing to do with the history of ancient religion. So it's still, you would be wondering, what's he got to say about Attis? And he mentions a castrated and crucified Attis in his paper Semiology and Rhetoric. Now you're wondering, why would he mention Attis? Well, and this is so special. It turns out that he's not talking about the ancient worship of Attis. He's talking about the character of that god as he appeared in a 20th century poem titled Vacillation by William Butler Yeats, which certainly fits into the theme. And in fact, what happens is when you look, he's referring to a metaphorical crucifixion, not even a real crucifixion. Attis is not crucified in William Butler Yeats' poem any more than he is in ancient mythology. But the poem is designed to sort of signal the segue between the classical world and the Christian world that followed, and it uses the figure of Attis, who was one of the last popular of the Roman gods, although he didn't start as a Roman god, but he was one of the longer surviving ones, uses him as that bridge between the two worlds, and basically the idea is that after he castrates himself, they have him in the poem, he falls and he's clinging onto leaves that are red, signaling the fall, and green. So he's like between the two worlds, and he's in a position that could be considered, his arms are spread, in a position that could be considered crucified, and thus signifying what would come later. So that's what he's actually writing about, where he calls him the castrated and crucified Attis. It has absolutely nothing to do with anything the ancients believed about Attis. And he wasn't actually even crucified in the poem. It was just they were using that as a metaphorical motif in the poem. And yeah, you have to wonder at this point, did she ever read this? Really? I mean, did she ever read this? I mean, seriously, did she? When she used this as a source? Did she ever read it? And the fact that now she's using it as a sort of, yes, he was crucified here, look at my graphic. It's Jose V. Harari, who actually didn't say it. As I mentioned, it was actually Paul de Man. Either she never really read the thing and just got castrated and crucified Attis from a Google book search, since the book, from what I've seen of it anyway, only appears in that what they call snippet form. So if you put in castrated, like crucified Attis, that book comes up, and then the author of what appears in the author, which is actually in this case really the editor, which is Harari. Did she just do that, or did she read it and totally not understand what was going on, or did she lie? I mean, right away, I know a lot of people would say, oh, she never read it. But honestly, she's come up with such screwy things in the past that I really can't even rule it out that she actually did read it and just doesn't get it. Well, I will leave a link to my blog post so you can go over the details. And it is, as I said, just incredible. This is one for the ages. And with that, thank you very much for your time.